Presidential dining offers a unique look into the personal tastes and eras of America's leaders. Their food choices reflect upbringing, personality, and the times they lived in. Join us as we delve into the unique food preferences of individual U.S. presidents during their tenures, unveiling the flavors that helped form a nation. George Washington, hoecakes and honey. George Washington, our first president, loved hoecakes, made from cornmeal. At Mount Vernon, they were often served with honey. He enjoyed simple, hearty meals. Hoecakes, a staple in colonial America, were his breakfast choice. He'd have them with butter and honey. The name hoecakes comes from cooking them on a hoe or griddle. On warm summer mornings, he'd relax in the gardens, enjoying hoecakes and reflecting on his beloved Virginia. These cornmeal discs were popular hall social classes. Washington's estate milled its own corn, ensuring a steady supply for his breakfast. But we can't talk about culinary classics without mentioning our next president's favorite food, which made a mark in its own unique way: John Adams' hard cider. John Adams, the second president of the fledgling United States, had an affinity for the amber nectar known as hard cider. This alcoholic drink, made from fermented apple juice, was a staple in many colonial homes in the late 18th century. Adams was reported to have started each morning by quenching his thirst with a sizable tankard of the stuff. As a native of New England, where apples grew in abundance, hard cider's popularity was unsurprising. At a time when water sources were often tainted, cider's alcoholic content made it safer for consumption than plain water. However, Adams' partiality for the beverage extended beyond its restorative properties. His fondness for hard cider also reflected the self-sufficient lifestyle he valued as an early American patriot. And even as time marched on, the charm of the next food on our list was hard to ignore: Thomas Jefferson, macaroni and cheese. Thomas Jefferson had a deep passion for various delicacies discovered during his travels abroad. The pasta machine he bought from Italy sparked his culinary creativity. Among his new recipes, macaroni and cheese stood out. In 1802, Jefferson showcased this dish at a grand event. He introduced it to dignitaries, blending simple and sophisticated flavors. While others opted for lavish dishes, Jefferson chose comfort food. He prepared it in Monticello, combining pasta and melting cheese. This dish, much like the wine, offered warmth. Jefferson loved sharing meals with friends, promoting both elegant and humble food from his travels, but nostalgia often brings back fond memories, and our next food is sure to stir up a few. James Madison ice cream. James Madison, the esteemed fourth president of the new republic, had an unbridled passion for all things sweet and chilled. None matched the fervor of his dear wife Dolly, however, in championing the cause of frozen confections. At lavish White House events, she ensured plenty of ice cream was available. Both famous and everyday guests were drawn to it. The flavors ranged from common to surprising. Back then, treats weren't just fruity. They could include beans, grains, and even some vegetables. The first couple's love for ice cream symbolized the new country's shift towards indulgence as it embraced new luxuries. And though trends come and go, our next food stood the test of time for quite a while: James Monroe spoon bread. James Monroe was fond of a dish that stemmed from his southern upbringing. Spoon bread, a soft cornmeal custard resembling a pudding, arose in the countryside of Virginia where Monroe resided. As president, his affinity for this regional specialty reflected the hearty, uncomplicated fare rooted in his heritage. The simple yet savory spoon bread, usually enjoyed with butter or gravy, held memories of days past for Monroe. His taste for the comforting spoon bread from his youth, while in office, transported him to a simpler time. Though president, the simple spoon bread from his Virginia home steadied him. It was a taste of familiar ground. And now, I know favorite dishes are a thing of choice, but how many of us would agree with the president on this next dish? John Quincy Adams fresh fruit. John Quincy Adams, the sixth president, had a penchant for fresh fruit, particularly apples. Adams was known for his disciplined lifestyle, which extended to his diet. He often enjoyed fresh fruit with his meals, reflecting the early 19th century belief in the health benefits of fruits and vegetables. Apples were especially popular in New England, where Adams was from, and were a common and accessible food during his presidency. Adams' love for fresh fruit was part of his broader commitment to a healthy and balanced diet. But though some foods faded away quietly, our next food came with a bang: Andrew Jackson, leather breeches. Andrew Jackson rose to the highest office despite his humble frontier origins. There, Families relied on practical fare to survive the long winters. One such sustaining supper he savored from his youth was leather breeches. They were green beans, dried and strung until nearly brittle. This preserved their nutrients through the barren months. When boiled, the rehydrated legumes absorbed the smoky essence of pork fat, awakening memories of simpler times. Though now president, he still loved the dishes of his youth. They had helped pioneers endure hard times. The dish showed the toughness and tenacity of Old Hickory. It reminded him of his roots among the common folk he admired. And now, from humble beginnings to a beloved favorite, our next food had quite a journey. Martin Van Buren, oysters. Martin Van Buren, the 8th president, was renowned for his passion for oysters. In the 19th century, especially in New York, oysters were a popular treat. They were enjoyed raw, in broth or baked. Van Buren loved these briny mollusks for their rich, salty flavor. His strong preference showcased his upbringing near busy ports, where oysters were a seasonal staple. Even today, Van Buren's love for seafood highlights how time and place influenced him, reflecting the once thriving oyster trade. And even though the next food on our list might not be the first thing you think of, but it certainly had its moment in the spotlight. William Henry Harrison Squirrel Stew. William Henry Harrison, the 9th president, had a taste for squirrel stew, a dish that was common on the American frontier. Squirrel stew was made by simmering squirrel meat with vegetables, like onions, potatoes, and carrots. It was a hearty, flavorful dish. Harrison's love for this stew reflects his frontier roots. It was a common, simple food among early American settlers. Unfortunately, Harrison's presidency lasted only 31 days due to his death, but his love for squirrel stew remained part of his legacy. And just like squirrel stew, there's something special about a food that can evoke so many memories as our next food did. John Tyler, Indian pudding. John Tyler, the 10th president, was renowned for his enjoyment of Indian pudding, a traditional New England delicacy. Tyler, a fan of the Northeast, loved a creamy cornmeal dish. It simmered with molasses and spices. Slowly cooked, Indian pudding was a rich treat. It reflected the merging of native and colonial cuisines. Cornmeal, or Indian meal, as it was also known, proved a staple for both indigenous peoples and settlers alike. While the dessert was widely popular in the 19th century, especially in the Northeast, Tyler maintained a particular penchant. His fondness highlighted the regional flavors that shaped the nascent cuisine of early America. Sometimes longer and more intricate, the pudding blended ingredients and histories in its own way. It mirrored the young nation's evolution from many cultural intersections. But our next food is a testament to the creativity that can be found in the kitchen. James K. Polk, cornbread and buttermilk. James K. Polk certainly held a preference for simple Southern fare. The 11th president's favorite dish was a staple amongst those from the region he hailed: cornbread paired with buttermilk. This humble combination nourished countless in the agriculturally focused South. Cornmeal, a staple crop, was fashioned into hearty cornbread to complement diverse meals. Meanwhile, the thirst-quenching buttermilk was sometimes drizzled atop slices or consumed on its own. Polk's love for this duo epitomized his roots. It underscored the down-to-earth, robust eats that formed the foundation of his diet. For many Americans, cornbread and buttermilk sustained them. They represented the era's practical, resourceful spirit. While this beloved bite comforted people across the South and linked Polk steadfastly to his origin, and while some foods struggled to make an impact, our next food did so with ease. Zachary Taylor Callis. Zachary Taylor fell in love with Callis while in Louisiana. These fried rice cakes were popular in the Creole community. Made from leftover rice, flour, eggs, and sugar, they are fried until crispy and topped with powdered sugar. During his long stay in New Orleans, Taylor got to know local dishes well, with Callis being his favorite. Vendors selling these snacks were everywhere in the city. Taylor's love for Callis highlights the rich culinary traditions in the American South and their influence on the national food scene. But our next food didn't just fill the president's stomach, it filled his heart as well. Millard Fillmore, mock turtle soup. Millard Fillmore was a devoted fan of mock turtle soup, a popular dish from his era. This soup used a calf's head as a clever replacement for rare turtle meat. It was seasoned richly with an assortment of herbs, spices, and vegetables to resemble the elusive taste of turtle. Fillmore's taste for the imaginative soup mirrored the fascination of his contemporaries with extravagant and unusual fare. At esteemed gatherings, servers would present a rich soup. It represented the age's taste for luxurious, complex dishes. The 13th president likely liked the mock turtle soup. It connected to the refined culinary experimentation of his time, but this next food was a staple at many gatherings, and it's easy to see why. Franklin Pierce, fried clams. Franklin Pierce, the 14th president, was renowned for his profound passion for fried clams. Pierce, a native New Englander, enjoyed the region's best seafood. His favorite? Perfectly fried breaded clams. The dish involves coating clams in thick batter and frying them until golden and crispy, yet juicy inside. Fried clams surged in popularity in the 19th century, especially in coastal areas with fresh seafood. Pierce's love for these clams shows how regional foods shaped his diet. It also highlights seafood's role in New England cuisine, and the next food may have been simple, but it packed a lot of flavor. James Buchanan, cabbage and rice. James Buchanan, the 15th president, had a fondness for cabbage and rice, a simple yet hearty dish. This combination of staple and common pantry ingredients was a humble meal that warmed the bellies of laborers during the 1800s. Buchanan preferred his cabbage chopped and cooked with rice until soft. He seasoned it with a pinch of salt, a crack of pepper, and a dab of butter. This simple dish reflected the Pennsylvania Dutch values of his upbringing. It showed thrift and provided filling meals for workers. Cabbage and rice not only nourished but also mirrored his plain, practical lifestyle. This was true during his presidency and beyond. Often, late at night, he ate this meal alone, finding comfort in the flavors of simpler times and places. And even though cabbage and rice was a presidential favorite, the next food on our list brought something new to the table, literally. Abraham Lincoln apples and apple pie. Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president, had a well-documented love for apples and apple pie. Lincoln was known to eat an apple almost every day, and apple pie was one of his favorite desserts. Apples were widely available, and a common fruit in 19th century America, making them a staple in many households. Lincoln's love for apples and apple pie reflects the simplicity and practicality that characterized his life and presidency. The fruit was often baked into pies, a popular dessert that was enjoyed across the country. Apple pie, in particular, became a symbol of American tradition, representing the nation's agricultural abundance and culinary ingenuity. For Lincoln, the humble apple and the classic pie made from it were not just foods, but also comforting reminders of his rural upbringing and the simplicity of life on the frontier. And you might not find it on menus today, but our next food was once a must-have. Andrew Johnson Hoppin' John. Andrew Johnson favored the distinctive Hoppin' John, a meal that traced its origins to classic Southern cuisine. This basic yet deeply flavored entree showcased black-eyed peas, rice, and frequently ham hocks, imparting their smoky essence. Traditions mandated its enjoyment on New Year's Day for securing future prosperity and luck. His affinity reflected simple origins and hearty dishes typical of rural life. The combination of legumes and grains provided balanced nutrition. This showcased the region's cooking creativity and traditions during tough times. Johnson's choice symbolized thrift and heritage, just as the ingredients combined flavors simply, but this next food was more than just a dish. It was an experience. Ulysses S. Grant, rice pudding. Ulysses S. Grant, the 18th president, was a fan of rice pudding, a comforting and classic dessert. Rice pudding, made from rice, milk, sugar, and spices like cinnamon or nutmeg, was a common dish in the 19th century. It was loved for its creamy texture and sweet flavor. Grant's fondness for it reflects his simple tastes and preference for homey foods. As elaborate desserts grew popular, rice pudding was a sign of Grant's love for traditional American cooking. From the first bite, our next food had people hooked. Rutherford B. Hayes, cornmeal mush. Rutherford B. Hayes, the 19th president, enjoyed cornmeal mush, a dish made by boiling cornmeal in water or milk until it thickens into a porridge-like consistency. This simple, filling dish was a staple in many American households, particularly in the Midwest, where Hayes was from. Cornmeal mush could be eaten plain, sweetened with sugar or syrup, or even fried after cooling. Hayes's preference for cornmeal mush reflects his modest upbringing and the common, practical foods that sustained many Americans during this period. The dish's versatility and affordability made it a popular choice, particularly among those living in rural areas. And even as new trends emerged, our next food held its own. James A. Garfield, squirrel soup. James A. Garfield, the 20th president, had a taste for squirrel soup, a dish he likely became familiar with during his early years in rural Ohio. Squirrel soup was a common dish on the American frontier. It was made by simmering squirrel meat with vegetables. Wild game was abundant and often the main source of meat. Garfield's love for this dish reflects his rustic upbringing and the simple, hearty foods of frontier communities. The soup was nourishing and flavorful, providing warmth and sustenance in the colder months, but our next entry was a presidential favorite for good reason, and it's time to remember why. Chester A. Arthur mutton chops. Chester A. Arthur, the 21st president, was known for his love of mutton chops. Mutton, which is the meat of mature sheep, was a popular choice for the more affluent classes during Arthur's time. Mutton chops, particularly when grilled or broiled, were considered a hearty and satisfying meal. Arthur's fondness for this dish reflects his status as a sophisticated New Yorker and his taste for more refined and large fare. The rich, savory flavor of mutton, paired with simple seasonings, made it a favorite among those who could afford more luxurious cuts of meat. But the next food was also a presidential favorite, and its appeal was undeniable. Grover Cleveland, pickled herring. Grover Cleveland's fondness for pickled herring originated from his Dutch and German ancestry. The 22nd and 24th president relished the cured herring fillets stewed in a savory brine containing sugar and spices. Cleveland grew up embracing the robust ethnic cuisine passed down by his predecessors. Pickled herring, a staple among Northern European immigrants settling in the United States, satisfied Cleveland's taste for the pungent yet fulfilling flavors. While his peers opted for more conventional fare, Cleveland stood out for his unabashed craving of the tangy, salty herring, sometimes enhanced with crunchy onions or creamy sour cream. Pickled herring is an acquired taste, but its robust, satisfying qualities made it a favorite of Cleveland's refined palate, shaped by his family's rich culinary roots. And while it may be gone now, our next food was once at the height of popularity. Benjamin Harrison, corn. Benjamin Harrison, the 23rd president, had a particular liking for corn in various forms. Corn, as a versatile and staple crop in the United States, was enjoyed in many different preparations, from cornbread to corn pudding to corn on the cob. Harrison's preference for corn reflected his Midwestern roots, where corn was a central part of the diet and agricultural economy. Whether enjoyed simply boiled and buttered or baked into a savory dish, corn represented the hearty, wholesome foods that were characteristics of the American heartland during Harrison's time. But our next food was a hit at every luxurious event, and it's easy to see why. William McKinley hot lobster salad. William McKinley, the 25th president, had a taste for hot lobster salad, a dish that was both luxurious and elegant. Hot lobster salad was made by cooking lobster meat and then combining it with a rich, creamy dressing, often baked briefly to heat through. This dish was a delicacy, showcasing McKinley's refined tastes. It also mirrored the growing American interest in complex dishes around 1900. Lobster, once cheap food, had turned into a symbol of wealth. Thus, it became a fitting favorite for a president leading during significant economic growth. But the flavors of our next food is still remembered by those who had the pleasure of trying it. Theodore Roosevelt, steak and eggs. Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th president, had a huge appetite. He loved hearty meals, especially steak and eggs. This classic dish of a juicy steak with fried or scrambled eggs suited his vigorous lifestyle and rugged persona. Roosevelt believed in the importance of physical strength and endurance for leaders. His favorite, protein-rich steak and eggs, fueled his active days spent hunting, exploring, and leading the nation. But the next presidential favorite food was ahead of its time, making waves before others caught on. William Howard Taft, turtle soup. William Howard Taft, the 27th president, was a fan of turtle soup, a dish that was both exotic and luxurious during his time. Turtle soup, made from the meat of freshwater turtles, was considered a delicacy and was often served at formal dinners and banquets. The soup was usually prepared with a rich broth, flavored with herbs, spices, and sometimes sherry, resulting in a complex and savory dish. Taft's fondness for turtle soup reflected his status and the opulent dining traditions of the early 20th century. This dish was a symbol of the elaborate and refined tastes that characterized the upper echelons of society during his presidency. But our next food was more than just food. It was a cultural phenomenon. Woodrow Wilson, Virginia ham. Woodrow Wilson, the 28th president, had a deep appreciation for Virginia ham, a type of country ham known for its distinctive flavor and long curing process. Virginia ham is typically salt-cured and aged, resulting in a savory and slightly salty taste that was highly prized. Wilson, who was born in Virginia, likely developed his love for this regional specialty during his childhood. The ham was often served thinly sliced, either as part of a breakfast spread or as a main dish, and was considered a delicacy in Southern cuisine. Wilson's preference for Virginia ham highlighted his connection to his Southern roots and the traditional foods of the region. But our next food was a true original, with a flavor all its own. Warren G. Harding chicken pot pie. Warren G. Harding favored the humble chicken pot pie, a dish that provided familiar solace. The flaky pastry was filled with a blend of tender chicken, soft vegetables, and occasionally potatoes in a rich cream sauce. This comforting dish was common on many American tables. It was known for its homemade, hearty sustenance. Harding's love for simple pie reflected his taste for satisfying warm food. This food nourished both body and soul. The pie featured chicken in savory broth, topped with a buttery crust. It stands as a classic American comfort food. Chicken pot pie embodies the hearty flavors of traditional home cooking across the nation. But the next entry on our list was a staple of many diets, and for good reason: Calvin Coolidge apple pie. Calvin Coolidge, the 30th president, loved apple pie. This pie, a symbol of American culture, features a flaky crust and spiced apples. It was common in homes and popular at gatherings and holidays. Coolidge's love for apple pie showed his preference for simple, classic American flavors. Apple pie is a perennial favorite in the United States and a fitting choice for a president who valued tradition and simplicity. It also underscored the deep-rooted connection between food and national identity in the United States. But our next entry was a favorite among both young and old: Herbert Hoover, sweet potatoes with marshmallows. Herbert Hoover loved sweet potatoes with marshmallows, a dish popular in his time. To make it, bake the sweet potatoes, add marshmallows, then broil briefly. It became a holiday favorite. Hoover's taste showed America's shift toward richer foods during the Roaring '20s and the Depression. The dish combined the potatoes' natural sweetness with caramelized marshmallows. This created a comforting meal, embodying the essence of American Christmas cuisine. But this next food had a unique charm that made it unforgettable: Franklin D. Roosevelt grilled cheese sandwich. Franklin D. Roosevelt, the 32nd president, loved grilled cheese sandwiches. This simple dish, made by grilling bread with cheese, became a comfort food during the Great Depression. Roosevelt's choice showed his connection to American struggles. The sandwich was cheap, easy to make, and comforting. Often paired with tomato soup, it symbolized frugality and resilience. This mirrored Roosevelt himself, who led the nation through tough times. Harry S. Truman, fried chicken. Harry S. Truman, the 33rd president, had a particular love for fried chicken, a dish deeply rooted in Southern cooking traditions. Fried chicken, with its crispy, seasoned crust and juicy interior, was a favorite comfort food in many American households. Truman's preference for fried chicken reflected his Missouri roots and the culinary heritage of the Midwest. The dish was often served with classic sides like mashed potatoes and gravy, making it a hearty and satisfying meal. Truman's love for this dish showed his simple, no-nonsense approach to life. It also reflected a connection to the honest food of the American heartland. But our next dish was a pioneer in its day, blazing a trail for others to follow: Dwight D. Eisenhower, beef stew. Dwight D. Eisenhower, the 34th president, loved beef stew. This dish matched his image as a strong yet caring leader. Beef stew, with its tender meat, potatoes, carrots, and onions in broth, reflected his simple, honest personality. After years in the military, he valued the warmth and comfort of this meal. It brought back memories and offered solace. His love for beef stew symbolized the post-war shift back to simple, homemade meals that fed families without overspending. Meanwhile, shorter but no less satisfying meals were also prepared and relished during his busy presidency. And our next entry was a trendsetter, introducing flavors that were ahead of their time: John F. Kennedy, New England clam chowder. John F. Kennedy, the 35th president, had a particular fondness for New England clam chowder, a dish that reflected his New England heritage. This creamy soup, made with clams, potatoes, onions, and sometimes salt pork, was a staple of the region's cuisine. Kennedy's love for New England clam chowder highlighted his connection to his Massachusetts roots and the maritime traditions of the area. The rich velvety of the chowder, combined with the briny flavor of the clams, made it a comforting and quintessentially American dish. Kennedy's preference for this soup became widely known and was often served at the White House during his administration, but the next food on our list was a favorite at every gathering: Lyndon B. Johnson, Texas barbecue. Lyndon B. Johnson, the 36th president, was a proud Texan with a deep love for Texas barbecue. Barbecue, especially beef brisket smoked over wood, was key to Texas cuisine. It was famous for bold flavors and tender meat. Johnson loved barbecue, showcasing his Texas roots and taste for hearty cooking. He often hosted barbecue dinners at his Texas ranch. There, he served smoked ribs, sausages, and brisket. He paired these with coleslaw and baked beans. Johnson's passion for Texas barbecue reflected his connection to the state and Southern traditions, but our next entry was a hit from the moment it was introduced. Richard Nixon, cottage cheese with ketchup. Richard Nixon, the 37th president, had odd food tastes. He liked cottage cheese with ketchup. This strange combo was a personal favorite. It showed his quirky side. People often ate cottage cheese as a healthy snack. The ketchup added a tangy, sweet contrast. The media sometimes mentioned his odd pairing as a sign of his unique personality. Despite its strangeness, this dish reflects the surprising tastes of American presidents. But our next food was more than just a dish. It was a culinary masterpiece. Gerald Ford waffles. Gerald Ford, the 38th president, had a well-documented love for waffles. This classic breakfast food was made by cooking batter in a waffle iron. It created a grid-patterned, crispy exterior. Waffles were a comforting, versatile dish, enjoyed with various toppings. Ford's preference for waffles reflected his straightforward, unpretentious nature. It also showed his love for traditional American comfort foods. Topped with butter and syrup, fresh fruit, or whipped cream, waffles were Ford's favorite. They embodied the simplicity and warmth of home-cooked meals during his time in office. But the next entry on our list was a staple at every gathering, and for good reason. Jimmy Carter. Grits. Jimmy Carter, the 39th president, was a Southern gentleman with a deep love for grits, a dish made from ground corn that is boiled to a creamy consistency. Grits are a staple of Southern cuisine, often served as a breakfast dish with butter, cheese, or even shrimp. Carter's preference for grits reflected his Georgia roots and his connection to the agricultural traditions of the South. The dish, with its humble origins and versatile nature, symbolized the simplicity and resilience of Southern cooking. Carter's love for grits was a nod to his heritage and the enduring culinary traditions of the region where he was born and raised. And the next food was a hit at every event, and it's easy to see why. Ronald Reagan. Jelly beans. Ronald Reagan, the 40th president, was famously fond of jelly beans, a sweet treat that became a symbol of his presidency. His love for the candy began as a strategy to quit his longtime smoking habit, and soon jelly beans were ever present in the Oval Office and at events. The colorful, chewy candies showed Reagan's sunny personality. He believed small gestures could bond with citizens. At meetings, long discussions were offset by plates of jelly beans that reflected his good nature. By the end of his tenure, the candies were synonymous with Reagan. They showed his knack for being approachable despite his heavy responsibilities. The jelly beans reminded everyone of his optimism during tough times, but our next entry was a true crowd pleaser, enjoyed by everyone. George H.W. Bush pork rinds. George H.W. Bush, the 41st president, was known for his love of pork rinds, a crispy snack made from fried pork skin. Bush's preference for this salty, crunchy treat reflected his down-to-earth nature and his connection to the Texas culinary tradition. Pork rinds, often enjoyed as a snack or bar food, were a favorite of Bush's, who appreciated their bold flavor and satisfying crunch. This snack choice highlighted Bush's straightforward, no-nonsense personality and his fondness for the simple pleasures of life, including enjoying a good savory snack. But our next food will leave you wondering why it was a presidential favorite. Bill Clinton, cheeseburgers. Bill Clinton, the 42nd president, loved cheeseburgers, a classic fast food. His fondness for them showed his connection to everyday Americans and their love of fast food. The juicy beef patty, melted cheese, and toppings made cheeseburgers his favorite late-night snack. This iconic dish, linked to the working class, symbolized his relatability and connection to the tastes of many Americans. Our next entry was beloved by many, and its absence is still noticed. George W. Bush chicken and cheese enchiladas. George W. Bush, the 43rd president, was a proud Texan. He loved Tex-Mex food, especially chicken and cheese enchiladas. This dish rolled soft tortillas around a filling of shredded chicken and melted cheese. It was topped with a tangy green or spicy red chili sauce. It was a staple of Tex-Mex dining and a favorite of Bush's. His love for the enchiladas showed his connection to the Lone Star State and the rich food traditions of the Southwest. The savory meal's bold flavors and satisfying ingredients provided a warming and soothing repast, encapsulating the essence of Texas's welcoming spirit and the melding of Mexican and American culinary influences that characterize Tex-Mex fare. And though it may have faded from the spotlight, Our next food won't be forgotten. Barack Obama chili. Barack Obama, the 44th U.S. president, loved chili. It is a hearty, spicy dish. He often cooked it himself in the White House kitchen. His famous chili recipe, with ground beef, red kidney beans, onions, peppers, and warm spices, became well known during his first presidential run. Obama's Midwestern roots and love of homemade meals drove his passion for this stew. Its comforting, robust flavors were perfect for him. He valued gathering friends and family to share a bubbling pot of chili. This down-home dish symbolized his informal nature and connection to everyday American life. But our next food was a favorite among both young and old: Donald Trump fast food. Donald Trump, the 45th president, loved greasy fast food, especially McDonald's. His time in the White House made it well known that he relished Big Macs, Filet-O-Fish sandwiches, and fries. His fast food obsession showed his love for their ease and consistent quality. It also reflected his connection with the working-class Americans, for whom fast food is a daily staple. Trump's preference for fast food became a defining feature of his public persona, symbolizing his populist approach and his connection to the tastes and preferences of many average citizens, as the next food on our list was a true classic. With a flavor that stood the test of time, Joe Biden ice cream. Joe Biden, the 46th president, is famously known for his deep and abiding love of ice cream. Few are unaware of Biden's passion for ice cream. He has been seen indulging in it on many public occasions with unbridled delight. Whether a simple scoop of vanilla or chocolate, or a multi-flavored sundae piled high, ice cream has come to epitomize Biden's informal, approachable nature. This resonates with everyday Americans who value life's simple pleasures. The dessert, beloved by all for its cold and creamy comfort, shows Biden's gift for connecting with the public over shared affections, both sweet and heartfelt. Now tell us, which of these presidential favorites dishes do you love most? Let us know in the comment section, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Thank you, and see you on the next one.